One, two.
Hello.
Hi! Welcome to the Video and Vinyl Club. I'm Emmy Wildwood. Happy New Year. I am a musician, producer, artist, art director, and this is my gorgeous co-host.
Hi, I am Erin Mars. I am an actor, writer, producer, director, and musician. And so happy to be here with Emmy today.
Me-
Happy New Year, Emmy. This is our first recording in 2025.
That's
So,
right. We took last week off because it was literally New Year's Day, the day that our
mhm.
episode would have come out, and we decided to give y'all a break.
I don't think there's a benefit in like rush culture. I think like giving yourself the space to relax makes the work that you do better
I,
and more meaningful. So it's like I'm really over the hustle,
Me too.
bustle
And
stuff.
I absolutely agree with that. And I have really started to take a lot of pride in fine-tuning anything I work on, whether it's a painting or a
Mhm.
song or our podcast. I have really the truth is that it takes time for a thing to develop. The last
Yeah.
5 years on Spotify and all of this stuff as a musician specifically,
hmm hmm
because of streaming and how quickly you can consume the media, like you
Yep.
always talk about, um, it has put this pressure on people to maybe release products before they're done, to
Yeah.
release more than they ever would. And what ends up happening is nobody's saying anything. Nobody's reflecting on anything. You
Right.
can't, if you're working through every single moment, you have no material to reflect upon. And that's kind of what pushes our world forward is the reflection we get to do that that is sort of the biggest benefit of art.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important to have that moment to be quiet, to just settle back. And to me, that's what winter has always been. So I almost feel like even though it's the beginning of the year, numerically and based on the calendar that we follow. I always really feel like though the beginning of the year for me like starts at my birthday because then it's like it's a new year for me.
Yeah.
And I do think being that we're currently in winter and we live in the Northeast, and I know not everybody does, but right now, if anybody's watching this on video, it's like completely downpour of snow behind me. And
Yeah.
it's a time to just kind of like read, get like super cozy, have those warm soups and the nice hot cocoa, and, like read the good book and do a puzzle and kind of just reflect. It's just a time to kind of reflect and be in the cocoon of creating. So often
Yeah.
we want to all jump into butterfly mode. It's beautiful, it's dazzling. Look at me, I'm flying around. Woo, look at all this stuff. But you have to be in the cocoon to get to that stage. Um, that being said, I feel like
Yeah.
that's kind of my resolution for 2025 is cocoon,
Uh,
just cocoon. Be cool with the cocoon.
Speaking of Cocoon, I was obsessed with Cocoon.
Oh yeah, the film Cocoon. That
The
was
more I say cocoon, the more it feels like a word I've never said before in my whole life.
I know
Cocoon,
it's
cocoon,
it is a fun
cocoon.
word to say. All those C's. Cocoon, cocoon.
Yeah,
It's like a bird call. Cocoon,
that's what I was
cocoon.
gonna say.
Yeah.
Oh
Oh
man,
man.
Cocoon, so good. All the
It's
old people swimming in the pool, glowing and turning in and out of
oh,
aliens. So good.
beautiful.
Loved
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and maybe that's what's going to happen to people who live in New Jersey like me as we have all of these alien sightings that seem to be getting more and more heated and the drones coming
Uh,
and nobody knows where they're from. And then people are,
yeah.
I mean, the theories about that, I don't know if you've been following, are insane. Like there's
Uh,
just so much happening right now
yeah.
where there's this feeling, I think, locally of like, yeah, somebody might see an alien soon. It's
Yeah.
just like it's gonna happen.
I was online too last night, like deep scrolling
Yeah.
TikTok,
Oh,
and I
that's always
saw,
fun.
well, yeah, and I saw
Yeah.
some of that stuff kind of for the first time. Like I knew the drones were around, like I knew all of that stuff. And um honestly, there have been drone sightings in my life as far back as 2019, 2020.
Yeah.
Specifically in Arizona when I was there, there was a lot of that stuff happening. And at first I was
Oh,
like, yeah, at first I
yeah.
was like, it's just a drone. Cause like actually being friends and in the movie making community,
Hmm.
people have
Hmm.
used drones for art projects for a long time. So it wasn't
Sure.
like I'm not like scared of drones specifically. But then when I started reading that they were the size of a car, that that I was like,
Like different story now. Yeah.
yeah, it's starting to get really
Hmm.
weird. And anyways, I saw a bunch of stuff about how it's really hard to tell now with AI video making what
Interesting.
clips are real and not real. And so like
Yeah.
we all have to like kind of wait
Yeah.
and then I got even deeper on TikTok and they were saying like
Ooh.
this is what they meant by parallel universe. Like
Ooh.
when they were talking about AI existing, because you could like literally be yourself in a video and like be like abducted by aliens and like
Yeah.
blah 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 just digitally, and this is what they mean by meant by parallel universe. And I was like, I think it's time for me to watch The Housewives because
Like too much.
this is all getting a little deep for me, but
Oh
a
my
little
gosh,
out there.
so funny.
So anyways, yeah, there's so much of that crazy stuff happening, but I don't know, I have this really big feeling that it just takes a minute for our brains to catch up with the
Mhm.
idea of technology. And the last time I saw this happen, really was only a few years ago, or maybe 5 years ago. I don't really remember exactly, but recently, in the recent
Yes.
past, consumerism changed, commerce changed, e-commerce changed, and they started to track what you were looking at online
Mhm.
and then be able to sort of suggest to you certain products you wanted to buy.
Mhm.
Your microphone was allowed to sort of listen in. It still is. You give apps permission
Mhm.
to do that, but they didn't really mass warn the public about it. They
Sure.
just sort of let it creep in and happen, thinking everyone would adjust to it. And there was a bit of like a cultural and moral panic about
Yes.
that.
Yes.
And it drove some people crazy a little bit,
Yes.
like, oh, they're
Yes.
listening to me, blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
And it all happened at the time where there was like a lot of hacking occurring across the board because of that stuff. Because of
Yeah.
that stuff, I think it takes, everyone felt like it was the world was like corrupt and you know what I mean? You start sort of
Sure.
feel and you have to take it back all the way to back when people panicked about television. You know what I mean? I always kind of like check it by being like, yeah, but everyone was totally freaked out by TV and movies and
Yeah.
telephones and
Yeah. Yeah.
so
I mean, I think you're touching on a lot of things about technology and the crossover with human development. Like there's a book
mhm,
called The Singularity Is Now, and written by Ray Kurzweil. He's alive. He's like a scientist, professor guy, taught at Yale. I don't know if he's still there, but in his book, he talks about the way that humans have developed. You go over time and it's like a long stretch of different things changing. And then we hit with the Industrial Revolution and stuff starts to go really, really fast. Changes were happening really fast. And from us, almost like a psychological level, it was harder for people to keep up. And
yes.
now, as the singularity is this moment, that's when technology and humanity combine and the universe will awaken is how they talk about it. And that's
Wow.
supposed to be coming up. Like we're getting
What's
closer
that
and
book called?
closer.
What's the book?
The singularity is now.
The
by
singularity
Ray
is now.
Kurzweil. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Go on.
And it's a very interesting book because it's a lot of like physics kind of stuff that he talks about. And he actually talks about it in like a way that if you are not into physics and really understand all of that stuff, that you can. He has almost like a dumbed down version of a conversation with somebody in the future and somebody in the past. And they kind of talk about this. But he also has a lot of graphs showing timelines and different things that make it visually easier to kind of understand.
Mhm.
And you can even really see that in our own lifetimes and even like in our parents' lifetimes, right? Like in 1950, I think only 20% of households, or maybe it was like 30% of households or something had it. And I'm saying 1950, not the 50s, but like the start of 1950 was like maybe 30% had televisions. By the time you get to 1960, it's almost like 100% of houses have television. And
Wow.
most of them are color television because then there was the
Hmm.
thing at the switch over. Not everybody had a color television.
Hmm.
There was also that switch when telephones, you're talking about even before that,
Yeah.
telephones, there used to be party lines. People would have a phone number, or they didn't even have a phone number. They get on and they're like, call the Hendersons, at 1273 Lane. And then the operator would be like, okay, connecting you now. And like, doot, doot,
Yeah.
doot, like physically moving the stuff to those circuits. Like, we can't even really imagine that. I mean,
Bring
there's
back party lines.
yeah,
Bring back party
yeah.
lines.
But like the teenagers I live with, like they, never understand. I mean, like, I don't even know if they've really had the experience of like the land phone, where you would get called up and then like maybe your
Yeah.
sibling is like listening in on another line. You're like, yeah, there's just all this technology that's been developing so quickly.
Hmm.
And generationally, I think is part of the reason why those generation, we talk about Gen X, Gen Y,
Yeah.
millennials, Gen Alpha, Gen Beta, whatever. I don't know
Hmm.
if they're calling them Gen Beta. That would, that would be a little. But the whole reason, like, that generations were created, or like, what generation are you? That stuff wasn't around prior to the 1900s. It didn't need to be. The
Yeah.
reason it's now there is it's aligning up with technology. People in the group generation have a similar experience of the technology of that moment. So it's like part of the reason why Gen Z is different than millennial is because Gen Z grew up with the iPad, all this shit in front
Yeah.
of them, all this
Hmm.
stuff, from a pretty young age. Everything is just like a given of the technology that if you're older, you saw come in and be like, oh, that's so new. That's so cool. How do I use this? They grew up
Yeah.
and that shit was already in their house. That changes the way you think about the world.
Yeah.
So that's
Well,
all. Anyway, it's a fascinating book. You got to read it because it
I
talks
like
about
that.
all the stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, so how did we even get on this? Because we were talking about Cocoon and the drones and how weird this
The
year has
drones
been
and
so
aliens
already.
and
And you and I are
you
just going to cocoon and move slowly because we aren't going to feel
yeah,
pressured by the chaos that is the world to put out stuff that isn't fully baked. So
exactly.
so we
Yes.
have fully formed our thoughts. Listen, it's not hard for
Yes.
us to form thoughts and then tell them to you because we would be doing it anyways on the telephone, talking it out.
Yes.
But we did watch a movie over the break. We both watched the same movie, at least one over the holiday break.
Yes.
And I watched a ton of movies because I got super sick. So I was kind of stuck in a chair for 2 days
Yeah.
and was like, these are the 2 days I'm going to watch 9 million movies. And I purposefully didn't watch any sort of like hot trending films because
Sure.
I wanted to save them, give them my full attention. But I did dig into a lot of indie filmmakers and felt good about that because you got to support the people out there really making stuff and putting their whole hearts into things with because making art is an act of hope. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just wanted to pay a little attention to those folks who are
Oh, I love
believing.
that. I love what you just said, though.
Yeah.
Making art is an act of hope. That's a beautiful way to phrase
Yeah.
it.
I
Hmm.
mean, it is, and it has been. I think it's like we as little kids wanting to be in any kind of entertainment industry think don't think about the odds. But we are
Yeah.
so driven by loving to do the thing.
Yeah.
Um that's along the lines we become an expert at it, and a lot of times by a young age. And so then once you become an expert at something, you feel like you should be in the running for, a light being shown on that expertise that you have developed. Once you're in it, you start to really understand how hard it is to do it and how you have to keep going, and that there is a big chance that a great number of your works will not make any money. And then you have to ask yourself, am I doing it anyway? The making art as an act of hope part is you never know where it's going to end up. You never know what's going to happen. And you always have to hope that something is going to become useful to somebody. A piece of work will become useful.
And talking about art that gets seen and that people tune into, there last night at the Golden Globes, one of the actors in the film that we're going to be talking about today, A Different Man, won the best performance by a male actor in a musical or comedy for his role. And that actor is Sebastian Stan. So let's get into it. Let's start talking about A Different Man, because this was a film I had heard a lot from different friends. Kind of, they're like, you have to see this movie. This movie is crazy. You have to see this movie. Uh, I was like, okay, whatever. Sounds interesting, right? I mean, it definitely sounds interesting. And I have to be honest, this is just my first hot take on it. I feel like I need to watch it like three more times,
Yeah.
because it was like the first time I saw it, and I've only seen it once so far, I was kind of in some ways like shocked, but almost kind of didn't love it.
Yeah.
Um, so Emmy, do you want to talk about the premise of the film?
Yeah, the premise is that a man is born with sort of massive deformities on his face, neurofibromatosis,
Yeah, disfiguring. It's like a disfiguring facial condition.
a disfiguring facial, and an extremely disfiguring facial condition. It sort of shows his experience and with as like living with this condition. He's a little bit like a celebrity everywhere he goes. People seem to want to talk to him about it or be extra nice to him. People seem to recognize him because they've seen him before because his condition's so distinctly memorable.
Mhm.
He is a working actor, but not working that much. He gets
Mhm.
mostly voiceover work
Mhm.
and sort of it's a kind of a joke that he's a character playing someone with a disfigurement in office conduct videos that people might play inside a corporate office system to teach the employees how to treat other people in the office.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's playing someone with a disfigurement. I guess that's where we get into calling it a dark comedy. It's sort of making fun of itself in certain points.
Sure.
Um, anyways, he has an opportunity to go through a medication process
Mhm.
to essentially heal himself of this disfigurement, and he does. And after a very gruesome transformation, he is a good looking, and it changes his receivability in the world.
Yep.
People perceive him very, very differently. He
Totally
becomes,
shifts his
yeah,
confidence
it
level.
shifts
Yeah.
his personality totally.
Mhm.
He goes from being someone who's kind of artistic to somebody who is like a real estate hotshot and he's getting a lot of girls, and he's kind of like really outgoing, but in a completely different take on his life. Like it's all different choices,
Yeah.
nothing that he was sort of striving for before.
A couple things that also happen when we first meet him, he has a new neighbor who's moving in named Ingrid Vold, who's like an aspiring playwright. And though you can tell he's romantically interested in her, she's beautiful and she's engaging with him. And she is someone who seems very vivacious. She's got this love life of guys like knocking on her door and she's like, get out of here. Oh, yeah, that's just a jilted lover. She's just got this whole thing about her that compared to Edward, who's so quiet and so inward, it almost makes him like way too intimidated to really act on any of these romantic feelings that he has for her. So when he goes through that medical transformation where he's part of this medical experiment, they give him some different medicine and completely the deformity melts off of him physically. And he not only moves on into this new part of his life, but when the scientists show up to be like, is Edward here? Because he hasn't shown up at our lab for a while. He goes and says, oh, he's dead. He killed himself. And his neighbor hears that. And then we fast forward in the film where he's now no longer Edward, he's Guy. He's
Oh
very
yeah, he changes his
successful.
name. Yeah.
He's a very successful real estate agent, which we all know is like a very forward facing job. You need to be really comfortable with people and they're going to see you. His face now is on billboards.
Yeah.
He's like a top seller. He's got all this great stuff going for him. And then he runs into Ingrid.
Right. Now Ingrid is a playwright,
Mhm.
and he thought that was sort of a charming aspect of her personality from before he had makes his transformation.
Mhm.
Um, and but he'd never seen any of her work, and he runs into Ingrid as Guy, and he follows her to her job and sees she's written a play about her neighbor who is deeply disfigured, who becomes very depressed and kills himself.
She's written a play about him.
Yeah, she has exploited her brief interaction with him. Now, I just want to stop here really quickly and say one thing, which is that when you first meet Ingrid, you feel like she's nice. Maybe
Yes.
being nice to him, even though he looks disfigured, but she is a little hot and cold.
Yes.
And she seems detached,
Mhm.
but she does kind of show up. And you start to see as the story goes on, what we were perceiving as hot and cold and detached is really sort of that exploitative side of her personality, where she was just studying him, essentially. She was sort of just being around him because she lives a little bit in a fantasy world and just wanted to make her life more interesting, maybe. Um, you sort of
So
realize that from the
so that's
second she met him, right?
well, okay, so that's an interesting take on it because
Okay.
and I'm not saying you're wrong. You're
Yeah.
definitely, you know, there's you got legs to stand on.
Yeah.
My only thing is I don't know if she's that smart.
Yeah. She doesn't.
I think she does it in this way that's like she because in the apartment building that they're both meet living in is not like a fancy ass apartment building. You get the
No.
feeling it's like, he's not really making a lot of money. She's not making a lot of money. They're both at this like level where they're doing things or her being a playwright. It's not like that's a career where you make a ton of cash, right? But
No.
she's like happy to a degree to be in this level of existence.
Yeah.
And she doesn't present as super ambitious, although being in the arts in general, you have to be a pretty ambitious person. We could make that
Yep.
argument.
Yep.
She definitely takes advantage of his death
Yeah.
and uses that, but you could say that's her mourning him in a sense. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. It's interesting. She's definitely like by the end of the
Well,
film, I had a very different feeling on her than I did in the beginning. I thought like, okay, but the whole thing felt like kind of icky, right? I think
yeah,
that was
I didn't like so right off the bat I wasn't crazy about her because she seemed in disingenuous.
yeah,
Yeah, like she seemed regardless of whether she had a plan or not to study him, she seemed like a bit of a user. She doesn't take his gift of his typewriter very sort of seriously, like she doesn't
yes.
if
So
she's not
he's
connecting to sort of emotional cues
sure.
that you would like a woman who's a playwright to connect with or something.
So at one point, Edward, she came into his apartment. Edward has this typewriter. She asks him, "Are you a writer?" He's like, "No, I just found this on the street. I keep it here. I don't even know if it works." But he had typed one sentence on the typewriter and she reads it and he says, "You can take the typewriter if you want. You're a playwright. You should take the typewriter." So she does. Then later, when Guy sees Ingrid and follows her, finds out she's doing this play, he asks to read for the lead role. She doesn't want him to because she wants to cast somebody who really has neurofibromatosis. But he's like, I'm pretty sure I can nail this character because the character is him.
Yeah.
He puts on a mask, which is an actual reproduction of his actual face that the scientists, before they did these experiments, gave to him almost as like a souvenir. He puts that back on his face. He reads the part, and everybody in the audience who is, watching these auditions is completely blown away because
Yeah.
he is Edward, who is her character.
Hmm.
So then she's like, okay, you know what? This wasn't what I was intending, but you seem to really get this guy. You seem to really know him and all this stuff. You know what? I'm going to cast you. It's great. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out a mask. We'll figure out something. We'll make it work. Well, they then finally begin this romantic relationship, right? And what happens, which is, I think, maybe why this is part of the dark comedy part, is a guy shows up named Oswald, who was sent from this casting director who, represents people with disabilities and people who are just like different that you would need or be interested in if you were doing a piece or something. Oswald comes in. He watches one of the rehearsals. He's like, wow, that was amazing. You really understand this character. Sorry for interrupting. And Oswald, who also, and in real life, the actor does have neurofibromatosis.
Whoa, that was really him?
That's really him. So that actor really has that condition.
Oh my.
Yeah. So he comes in and in real life, like as a human being, he has that condition. In this film, obviously, he's comes in as a guy who has this because he always has that. But anyway, when he comes in, he says to them as he's watching Edward slash Guy now, pretending now that he has the condition that Oswald has. He's like, I don't want to interrupt. I just want to watch a little bit. And then he starts to become friends with Edward, starts to become friends with Ingrid, starts to put some, feedback in. Ingrid's like, well, we're going to keep him around because Oswald's got some good ideas and he really has this condition. And so we want to know what he really feels like. Where Guy, who also had actually had the condition, Guy slash Edward,
Yeah.
starts to go freaking crazy because here's this guy Oswald who has the same condition that he had, but Oswald has a completely different personality. He's like
Yeah, he has a
outgoing.
different,
He's
yeah, and
not scared. He
he's
doesn't,
not dark. He's not
he's not dark.
depressed.
He
Yeah.
sees women and he's like, I'm going to give it a shot. He's like investing in stuff. He was previously married. He has a child. Like all this stuff.
Yeah, he
And
doesn't let his condition get in the way of
ex-
anything. He's
the complete,
thriving.
yes, the complete
Thriving.
opposite of
Yeah,
Edward. Okay.
right.
And as we see, and then the film goes from there. And I don't want to give out the end because I do think people should see it. I would love
Yeah.
people to see it and then comment to us
Yes.
about it.
Yes. Yes.
Um, but I thought it was really cool. That was something I really respected about the film, that they cast Adam Pearson, who is a British actor and presenter and campaigner who has neurofibromatosis. And he's actually been involved in outreach programs to prevent bullying associated with deformities. He's somebody that's very active, and he's 39 years old, and he's been, in a lot of different things. And it's pretty impressive.
Yes.
Um,
So listen, I have to tell you, I had no idea. I had no idea that was like the makeup in this movie is so good. The special
yes.
effects makeup is so good in this movie that I had no idea that actor actually had the condition. I just figured that both of them were had makeup on. So I did not know that. I didn't do my research on that particular character, but that's fascinating. Let's just say that this is one of those movies. I have brought this up before, and I feel like Erin sort of emptily laughs. Emptily, that's not a word, but you sort of like it's almost like you don't understand it because you're just like too strong minded of a human being. Like you're just too stabilized to understand the concept of intrusive thoughts taking you down like the darkest road ever, where you're like, you just can
Oh
be like,
no, come
what
on. I
if
understand
thinking
that.
you do?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
okay,
absolutely. As somebody
okay.
who's suffered from depression and anxiety all of their life, I definitely have had
Okay.
those spirals before. Yeah.
Yes, but the spiral downward is like, this is about like, what is the worst thing that could happen? Like, if this happens, then this might happen, and you're gonna die alone in the gutter. No one's gonna be there for you. And like, this director took you to all the places you might go in your mind about the worst thing that could happen if you make sort of a life-changing decision, like the sort of what ifs of, well, it could go worse for me. Right before we started filming the pod today, Erin said that this actor won for Edward.
Sebastian Stan.
Sebastian Stan won for Best Actor in a
Mhm.
musical or comedy. And I said, but this isn't a musical or a comedy. And
Yeah.
I said it's a thriller, isn't it? A suspense thriller. And Erin's like, they're calling it a dark comedy. And I would say it is, to me, I can see the comedic side in um
The
talking about it with
irony.
you right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, the irony, but
Yeah.
watching it is so disturbing to me. The comedy for me, the dark comedy part, it
Right.
goes stale on me a little bit because I hate everyone so much. A
You
little
hate the
more,
characters. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I don't like the characters' personalities. I don't like the choices they make. I
Yes.
don't I don't like anything about them. They don't have any redeeming qualities to me. Maybe Oswald does.
I would say, in a way, though, the guy Edward character, I just felt bad for him. I mean, I
Yeah.
feel like no matter what, it's like he is living a version of life where he's screwed.
Yeah, but
He's,
yeah.
like he doesn't have the attitude that Oswald has, who has the same condition as him, to have the type of life that Oswald had. He then becomes good looking. And instead of like continuing to look forward and just go, okay, you know what, whatever, his obsession circles back to that woman, and then he spirals back down.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the dark comedy in it. That's the part. It's like it gets so bad. Like the last act of the film, Oswald shows up, and then all this stuff that Guy slash Edward has built, and being an actor, being close to Ingrid, having an emotional relationship. And let's remember, Edward was an actor. Edward wanted to act. He just was not getting the opportunities because of his condition. So
Right.
when
So
he
it's,
becomes good looking and he gets the idea and he gets the opportunity to actually act in a legitimate off-Broadway play that everybody's, really interested in and finds it fascinating, he's getting this thing. It's like all the stuff he wanted before, he's now has. He is the girl that he wanted to be with. He's actually with He's acting as a lead in a play where that's amazing for him. He would have wanted that before, but now he actually has it. He's also good looking and successful, makes money as a real estate agent. So all the things that he didn't have before, he now has. But the thing that comes in and knocks that shit down like a house of cards is Oswald.
yeah, but he
Because
loses it because he doesn't have the condition he was born with. That's the whole
that's
thing.
the irony, right?
Yeah,
Which is the
right.
whole part that's like, dude, but
I just think as a human being, you have to practice some acceptance of your circumstances. If you have the opportunity to change something about yourself, something that's caused you a lot of pain your whole life, hell yeah, of course. But you have to accept what comes along with making a choice like that, which is that he has kind of a whole different life. And it
yeah, you're no
feels a
longer the same
little,
person. Yeah.
yeah, like it feels a little bit shitty to me that he can't, with grace, move
Yeah.
on from that need. And that's what I guess I'm trying to say is he clearly hadn't healed the inner Edward. He still sees himself as that old version of himself and is
Mhm.
mad at Oswald for coming in and taking what he thinks should belong to him. But technically, it shouldn't because he has made a new choice. When
Yeah.
you want everything, you want to be a
Yeah.
good looking guy and have everyone be obsessed with you and have the character and the personal fortitude and integrity of character that Oswald has as a human being out in the world. It's like you kind of can't. You can't.
What I find interesting actually is that we're having this level of a conversation about this film. So I think
Really?
it brings up a good point about this movie. Like, I think I would love to hear other people's thoughts on it because I do think, people can have a different take on it.
Yeah, I
Um,
just feel like it's one of these moments, like maybe I sound like an 80s mom right now or like a 50s mom right now, but no, 70s mom, me being
okay.
like, life's not fair sometimes, and you just have to eat it when life's not fair. Because fuck, man, life is not fair. You don't always get every single freaking thing you want. And there is winning involved in accepting something, accepting some circumstances gracefully.
And so that's kind of what you're saying is why you would say that the Oswald character isn't one of the people who's screwed up.
Yeah, I just think maybe the least screwed up. But I see Oswald sort of as like he enjoys the ass kissing a little bit. And
Well, he definitely is the perfect foil for Guy slash Edward
yeah,
because he is so similar and yet so different.
that's right.
And I think it's almost interesting to kind of think about, and they don't go into this, but like the backgrounds of maybe the childhood that both of them had. It's like nurture versus nature.
Mm-hmm.
Was Oswald in a family who is like, who gives an F that you have this? You're also smart. So I think the basis of what Emmy and I are both saying, and Emmy, I'm speaking for you, but I
And
feel like we're saying, I think people should watch this movie.
yeah, I think it's one of those ones where if you're left asking yourself a million questions, it means it's dense. Like there's a
Yes.
lot to contemplate. A lot of
Yes.
things happen.
Hmm.
Um, I personally can't watch this movie without comparing it to The Substance. I think it's pretty wild that both these movies came out the same year.
Yeah.
And it feels like very much the male perspective on some of this stuff. Like if you could change how you looked, like how far would you be willing to go? What would happen then? Um, he takes you down a lot of roads, this director.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Talking about the director, which is a great segue. So the director of this film is Aaron Schimberg, and he is a director that wrote the film as well. So this is written and directed by him. In his personal life, he actually had been born with a cleft palate, and he gives that as the reason that he often gravitates towards narratives that focus on characters with facial disfigurement. Um, and that the reflections on a person's face and how the world sees them is his way of writing about his own experience. So that's kind of really interesting to kind of know, and that gives you a little bit of insight into him. So this is the second film that he's done. The first one that he's best known for is called Chained for Life. That came out in 2019. And then, of
Wow.
course, A Different Man, which came out in 2024. Now, he has been named at the Palm Springs International Film Festival. He won the category of top 10 directors to watch. So he's definitely seen as somebody who's an interesting storyteller and he's got something to share. A Different Man won the best feature at the Gotham Awards. It won best screenplay at the Sieges Film Festival. And his previous film, Chained for Life, also won a ton of awards. Now, something to say, Chained for Life, Adam Pearson was also in. So he was also one of the leads in that film. And that's
Hmm.
about a beautiful actress who struggles to connect with her disfigured co star on the set of a European auteur's English language debut.
Huh.
So again, it's like a film about, I think, the way people kind of take to each other. Something else, though, really quickly to just talk about with Adam Pearson, who is the actor who plays Oswald. He had also been in a film which was how I kind of recognized him, called Under the Skin. Have
Oh
you
yeah.
have you
I've
seen
seen
that? It was like a 2013 sci-fi film. Scarlett
no.
Johansson is in it as like almost like this alien who eats men in Scotland. I remember it being very, very like crazy kind of to watch.
Yeah.
Some beautiful shots that were like really weird.
Hmm.
But I remembered him. I mean, I was like, oh, and so he's got a pretty good career. Like he's really been, 39 years old. He's been in a bunch of stuff. Back to the director, Aaron Schimberg, he's got stuff in the cooker. He's somebody definitely I think we're going to probably see more of again.
I feel like that's a pretty big accomplishment for a second film.
Hmm.
I feel like when you take a step back and you try and decide if something was, well, great. This brings us to our vinyl rating. I'm going to give this film an 8. I saw some holes in it, but I feel like the holes for me are unanswered questions about specific things that happen. I would have just liked some
More.
more solutions. Yeah, just a little more.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to agree with you. I'm also going to give us an 8.
Wow, we don't that's
I
interesting.
think that's the first time we've
I think
matched on
you're
our vinyl record rating.
I think you're rubbing off on me.
To me, this felt like a film that was kind of a slow burn. It was
Oh yeah.
pretty slow pace, but methodically keeps going forward. You see it like unfold, you see it unfold, you see it unfold. But it all kind of ties back together really beautifully. I think there was definitely an amazing sense of alignment in the way that the story flowed. I
Mhm.
think that the casting was, perfect. I couldn't see you casting with someone else and all of this working. I think that um
Casting was great. I
yeah,
think yeah.
the casting was great. I feel like so often you see films and you can be like, "Oh, this is basically some other film that was made 20 years ago, but they like have redone it." I
Mhm.
didn't I've never seen anything like this.
No, I haven't either.
And
It was very innovative.
yeah, and I think it was really thought provoking because it
Yeah.
kind of brings up about changes of self just in general. Like if you have a chance to have a fresh start and a totally new life, what is that going to look like? And do you end up looking back on what you
Yeah.
had and wanting what you had? It's just very, in some ways, it's just really, really interesting. Like,
I could tell it was a male director.
mhm.
It felt very sort of like it that's a fantasy though. Do you know what I mean? In the sense like if you could have a very different life, change your name. I mean, we just don't get to do that, really. And so
Yeah.
and there's a reason why, because the fit hits the shan. But do you know what I mean? That's why I was saying like there's limitations to being able to do that in reality. You can change your life. It's never too late to change your life. But to the level like to me it's like a fantasy to be able to like having a disease is the opposite of being the perfect person is not like I don't like that sentiment and feeling. Does that make sense? Like it's like he had to be either this sad broken human being who was
Aha. Or this
disfigured
perfect, good
or
looking, highly successful.
right.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing is Oswald shows that that's not true. And so it
Right.
makes that guy's character unlikable for me. And so to take someone like to ask yourself that question shows that you don't value
Oh,
like
interesting. Okay.
you see
Okay.
what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I understand what you're saying.
You can't value anywhere like it's black and white thinking. That's what it
Yes.
is.
So is that the reason, because you started off saying you could tell this was a male director? Is it because of that? Or is it because of the way that the female character was written? Because to me, I felt like it was the way the female character was written. I
I
could tell
mean,
it was a
both
male
things.
writer.
Both things. Yeah, the female character is really unlikable and silly and rude and
I
vain
don't even know if
and
she's silly. She's definitely vain and she's
yeah,
definitely selfish. She's
selfish. Yeah.
she's a very self-centered, selfish person with
Yeah.
a very small level of empathy. And anytime she makes somebody upset, it's kind of like, well, you just need to get over it.
Well, right,
It's like,
exactly. And she's like,
what?
I leave a path, like a wake of destruction in my path. That viewpoint of sort of the worst way you could look at a woman. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah.
I mean, maybe not the worst, but one of the worst ways. And also that I don't want to all men it here, but there are certain escapism qualities that
Yep.
men have. When men are escaping, they're thinking about like being a hot shot and bagging chicks and um do you know what I mean? Like becoming super handsome or rich or like being the coolest guy in town or something like that. And it's like women's escapism is like getting free time and do you know what I mean? Like being able to like I don't know.
Yes, not being
Um
undermined and actually listened to in a conversation with a man.
right, exactly.
Not to placate all men. I just want to put that
Or
out
getting
there.
to
We're not
start
saying
their
it's on
no
everybody.
movies about women's fantasies are. It's like then finally I started that cookie business I'd always dreamed of. And
Yeah.
like for him, it's like I'm hot and I am a hotshot real estate agent and whatever. So,
Yeah. I'm
but
popular. I've got friends.
right, everyone thinks
Know
I'm
how to dress. Everybody
right.
comments on how good looking I am.
Right. And that is maybe a stereotype of what men what a certain kind of man wants because like Oswald he is the antithesis to that. So to me it's like there's two roads, right?
Okay.
You can go down for men. And it's a male perspective on the two roads you can go down. You can go down the road where you don't think of women as pieces of shit and you do think that there's a middle ground that you can be successful and lovable and popular and all that stuff without being perfect. Like you can have a very enriched, fulfilling life without being a perfect sort of ideal sort of specimen. Like we don't get to meet another side of a woman. Do you know what I mean? So we get to see. So to me, it just felt more male dominated, the story, good or bad. That's, I guess,
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say. Anyways, go see this movie. I just wanted to touch on the Golden Globes before we get off what a little bit more too, which is that like Demi Moore won, our girl won for The Substance. I
Yes.
thought you'd be excited.
I'm very excited about that. I'm very
Yeah.
excited about that.
Some other big winners are some movies that
Mhm.
will be on our watch list for sure, actually. The Brutalist, Emilia Perez, that movie we're going to talk about on the podcast. That was a big surprise winner. But The Substance really had a ton of attention, so I'm proud of us.
Yes. Brutalist
So,
and Amelia Perez. And we will be talking about them definitely before the Oscars because we want to at least be able to talk about all of the wonderful films that are up for nomination for Best Picture, but also for Best Actress. I think that would be great to make sure we're seeing all of that stuff. I mean, were any of the wins from the Golden Globes, were you surprised by any of these? I mean, I definitely thought that Kieran Culkin deserved to win Best Supporting Actor, which he did.
he
Um,
did. That's
he
so great.
did. Yep. I
Yeah.
definitely thought that Demi Moore deserved her win. Definitely. Um, Sebastian Stan from A Different Man, definitely, because that role was crazy.
Nosferatu came out this week too, and I think we're going to talk about that next week, right, Erin?
Absolutely, we're talking about Nosferatu. As someone
Okay.
who is a huge uh horror movie fan, I have seen so many vampire movies. I've seen all the other Nosferatus. I will definitely be watching Nosferatu. We will be definitely doing a deep dive into that. I think we'll also just do a deep dive as part of that episode into maybe vampire lore and how, from a film history perspective, the original Nosferatu, which came out in, I think, like 1922 or maybe 1912 even, influenced the film industry in general. So that's going to be a really fun episode and definitely one.
Gonna be a really fun episode for me. Wah, wah. I don't like
You're going to learn so
blood.
much. You're going to
Well,
learn so much.
we'll talk about this on the vampire lore episode because like I don't think of myself as somebody who likes vampire stuff. And yet I've seen all of the Interview with the Vampires.
Uh,
I have seen Twilight. I read all the Twilights and saw all
whoa.
the Twilight movies.
Whoa.
How that happened, I don't know. I think I was just trying to be included in the conversation
Yeah.
and that's why I
Okay.
did it. And
Yeah.
then also
Oh, okay. So you really
so I've seen a lot of vampire stuff, even though I like to think of myself as someone who doesn't like vampire things. Vampire stuff plus horror movie plus I don't know. Might be a lot for me, but I'm gonna do it.
well,
It's about
Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula, was from Connecticut.
wow.
Yeah, and it was based, they think it was inspired by like some vampire stuff that was happening in Connecticut
That's where Erin's
during that
from.
time. Yeah, that's where I mostly grew up. So it's kind of fascinating because I think one of the reasons why I've always loved horror, like not even horror movies, it's monster movies. Let me go there because that's really
I
what I
dig
love.
that.
I
Yeah,
love monster movies. I love monster movies.
that's cute.
Is that the monster always, in some ways, you can drill down, represents more than just what they are, right? Like
Yeah.
vampirism is almost like capitalism. It comes in, it sees the victim, it sucks all it needs out, and then it's like next, and just like
Yeah.
just sucking these resources away and taking advantage and potentially turning a few other people into vampires, maybe, but like, maybe not. Um, and so it's very I don't know, they're all metaphors. Zombies are metaphors for
Sure.
socialism.
Yeah.
The monster of Frankenstein is a metaphor for, taking the will of God into your own hands and the destruction that that would create.
Hmm.
There's all these like breakdowns of it, but it's always one of those things that like unites a bunch of people against a thing, So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
that's the monster. Now we're united against this thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just love monster movies. I mean, maybe we can talk about that We'll do a few
No, I
special
love this.
episodes.
I let you guys are here for the like beginning of your meeting. We're gonna talk about vampire lore. We're gonna talk about monster episodes. We're gonna talk about the Oscars.
We're
We're
going to talk
gonna
about the,
talk
yeah.
about,
So we've got a
yeah.
lot of great stuff to share with you.
I think today was really fun. Felt a little unhinged because we talked about a lot more than just a different man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, how about this? So now that we wrapped 2024 in a sense,
Hmm.
what were some of your, favorite albums of the year, or even artists who kind of shone bright for you in 2024?
Well, I gotta tell you, I love Chappell Roan, but I don't love her like I love Fiona Apple when I was 16 or anything. Like everything to
Mm-hmm.
me is like, do I love this thing as much as I loved Fiona Apple when I was 16?
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
that is the most anyone can love any music ever. It made me cry. I wanted to be inside of it. I wanted Fiona Apple's music to be pregnant with me. That's how much I loved Fiona Apple at 16. So
Yeah.
I listened to the Mother Feather album a lot this year. I really did. It was really good. How about you? You loved Chapel too, though.
Yeah, but I think it's because if you're a fan of female artists in general, and you were somebody who like, you know, I went to Lilith Fair almost
Yeah,
every year when it was
yeah.
around.
Hmm.
If you were into that scene and like really part of that stuff, how could you not like her? Like her
Yeah,
sound is very, in a way, almost like nostalgic, and it's got like cheerleader
yeah,
vibes, but kind
yeah.
of like I'm the bad girl who smokes
Bitchy.
cigarettes
Yeah,
behind
I love it. Yeah, I
the
love
thing,
that. Yeah.
uh there was an artist I actually really got into called Clairo,
Oh,
and
I love Clara. It's really good.
I really loved that album because it was just chill kind of.
Oh, the Bear soundtrack. I listened to that. Like, thank goodness for the Bear soundtrack because, oh my God, now that's not new music, but that was like a very musical uh moment for 2024. Here's Music, who did the music supervision.
And the other album I liked is by Being Dead.
Whoa.
Did you
Never,
listen to that at all?
no, I never heard of it.
So it was this album with the song Love Machine that I liked.
That's
La
cool.
la 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 with like guitars. Those kinds of
Yeah.
twangy-ish kind of stuff. Fun. Yeah.
I think we've sucked the life out of this episode, Erin.
Yeah, we beat this with a dead horse.
We beat this with a dead horse, like a dead horse.
This horse is so heavy to lift up and beat with.
That was a real
Mm,
talk today.
mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
was real. We're a little,
Definitely.
the truth is we're a little wiped out from the holiday season. And
Yeah.
we're just, taking it one day, one step, one episode at a time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure.
Anyways, we
Well,
missed you and we're excited to talk about Nosferatu next week. So please tune in. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, and please
mm-hmm.
join us on our socials, Instagram, TikTokaloo, and leave us a 5-star rating. I saw a few new ones. Thanks, guys. It really makes a big difference. So please leave us a little 5-star rating and
Yeah.
review anywhere you can.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your support. Sending you warmth and luck and happiness for this week ahead. And we will see you next week.